My boots glided across the polished tile floor of Mercy General Hospital, making no sound at all. 15 years in the Marines taught me how to move silently. But today, that quiet carried a sense of wrongness. At 45, I was no stranger to pressure, from days facing danger on the battlefield to long nights worrying about my home repair business in the small town of Willow Creek, Oregon. But as I walked down the hospital corridor, the sharp smell of antiseptic and the cold white glow of neon lights overhead tightened my chest. Everything here felt off, like a bad premonition I couldn't explain. My daughter Sophie, 15 years old, was in room 237. She should have been arguing with me about schoolwork, or griping about curfew. But for months, Sophie had been a shadow of herself. Gaunt, pale, her once bright blue eyes now dulled like morning mist. The doctors at Mercy General couldn't explain why she had headaches, weight loss, or constant fatigue. They shook their heads, muttering about stress or some unidentified illness. I'd taken Sophie to 4 other hospitals, but no one had answers. Every time I saw her, I felt a nameless pain, as if I'd failed as a father. I pushed open the door and stepped inside. Sophie lay propped against crisp white pillows, her face pale as early fog, her blonde hair a tangled mess. Laura, my wife, sat in the corner chair, scrolling through her phone with unusual focus. Laura was always like that, beautiful, put together, with sleek brown hair and a smile that made people trust her instantly. But today, I noticed a coldness in her eyes, something I'd never seen before.
Before diving into the story, comment where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss the latest video.
Dad? Sophie's voice was hoarse, faint, like it took all her strength to speak. Can you come closer? I walked over, sitting on the edge of the bed. Her hand grabbed my wrist. Fragile as paper, ice cold enough to make me suppress a shudder. I need you to look at something, Sophie whispered, her eyes flicking to Laura before returning to me, glinting with fear mixed with hope. Can you look at my back? A chill ran down my spine, like a battlefield instinct. I kept my face calm, the way I did when facing danger. Sure, sweetheart, I said softly. I helped Sophie lean forward, pulling down the thin hospital gown. What I saw stopped my breath. Sophie's back was covered in dark purple bruises, handprints clearly etched on both shoulders, as if someone had gripped her tightly. Long, even finger marks ran down her spine like a map of horror. Near her ribs, a bright red burn stood out against her pale skin, shaped exactly like a belt buckle, the kind I'd seen in Laura's closet. The sight hit me like a punch to the chest, making me want to scream, but my military training kept my face expressionless. Sophie, I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. These marks, how long have they been there? Sophie didn't answer. Her eyes darted to Laura, who now looked up from her phone, her lips curving into a forced smile. What's wrong, baby? Laura asked, her tone sweet but sharp, like she'd rehearsed it. Sophie, what are you showing Dad? Sophie shrank back, her shoulders trembling like a small dog expecting a kick. Nothing, Mom, she said, her voice quivering too smooth, like she'd practiced it 100 times. Just bruises from lying in bed so long. I recognized the lie in Sophie's voice, the tone of someone who'd learned to hide fear. I'd heard it from traumatized recruits in the military, people trying to seem tough to survive. A cold, sharp anger, the kind that got me through 3 deployments, began to rise in my chest. Everything okay over there? Laura stood, walking toward the bed, her voice carrying just enough concern to convince anyone. But I saw Sophie flinch, her shoulders tensing like she was bracing for a blow. I leaned down, whispering so only Sophie could hear. Dad, please don't leave me alone with her, she murmured, her voice so faint I had to strain to catch it. Those words hit me like a bullet, turning everything in my mind upside down. I stood, pressing the nurse call button on the headboard. Laura frowned, her voice sharper. What are you doing, James? Sophie's just confused from the medication. The doctor said so. I'm calling the nurse, I said, my voice still calm but hard as steel. Sophie needs to be checked. A young nurse, eyes tired, appeared at the door. Is there a problem, sir? My daughter has injuries that weren't here yesterday, I said, stepping to block Laura's view of Sophie. I need you to call security and contact the police immediately. Laura let out a gasp, so convincing it was chilling. What, James? What are you talking about? What injuries? Sophie fell down the stairs last week. You know how clumsy she's been, especially since she got sick. Sophie shrank further at her mother's voice. I looked at Laura, seeing the fakeness in her eyes for the first time. The concern acted out too perfectly, like a well-rehearsed play. The nurse checked Sophie's back, her face shifting from indifference to horror. "I'll get Dr. Caldwell right away," she said, hitting the call button on the panel. "Security to room 237, requesting police assistance." Laura moved forward, her hand reaching out as if to touch Sophie. "This is insane. James, what are you saying?" I didn't answer. I looked at Sophie, her eyes shining with fragile trust. In that moment, I knew I'd missed something crucial for months, and I swore, no matter the cost, I'd uncover the truth to protect my daughter. I sat in the family meeting room at Mercy General Hospital, white light from the ceiling, neon casting harsh shadows on the scratched wooden table. The antiseptic smell clung to the air, mixing with the hum of the air conditioner. Across from me was Deputy Sheriff Sarah Mitchell, a tall woman with sharp eyes, her uniform crisp and her short hair neatly trimmed. She looked like she stepped out of a cop show, but her stern gaze and calm voice showed her dedication. A digital recorder sat between us, its red light blinking, a reminder that every word I said was being captured. "Walk me through the last few months, Mr. Callahan," Sarah said, jotting notes in a small notebook. "When did your daughter first get sick?" I kept my hands flat on the table, trying to sort through the jumbled memories. "A few months ago," I began, my voice steady. "Sophie started complaining about headaches. Then she couldn't keep food down. The doctors thought it was stress from school, but it got worse. Fatigue, weight loss, trouble focusing." I paused, guilt rising like a wave. "We saw 4 different doctors. No one could figure out why." Sarah took notes, her eyes never leaving me. "What about at home? Any changes in routine, discipline, or conflicts?" "Sophie's a good kid," I answered, my voice firm. "Never caused trouble." But then I stopped, a memory flashing by. Lately, Sophie had become more withdrawn, staying in her room, talking to me less. I'd thought it was just teenage moodiness, but now, after the bruises on her back, I wasn't so sure. "And your wife?" Sarah asked, her voice soft but pointed. "How has she been handling Sophie's illness?" The question hung in the air. I thought about Laura, about the past months, the exasperated sighs when Sophie couldn't eat dinner, the sharp comments about medical bills, how she started working late more often, leaving me and Sophie alone. "She's been concerned," I said slowly, but the word concerned felt wrong. I repeated it, as if testing it. "Concerned." Sarah echoed the word, like she was tasting it. "Concerned." She paused, looking me in the eye. "But she was there when you found the injuries. Sitting in the corner. How did she react?" I recalled that moment, Laura's forced smile, her sweet but icy tone. "She acted surprised," I said, then paused, weighing my words. "Seemed surprised." Sarah leaned forward, her voice lowering. "Mr. Callahan, I've been doing this for 15 years. In my experience, parents who find out their child's been abused react in one of 2 ways. They either lose control from anger and grief, or they get very, very careful with their words. Which one are you?" I met her gaze. "I'm careful," I said, "but that's because I was trained to stay calm under pressure." I paused, thinking of Laura, how she was out in the hallway right now, talking to another deputy. Through the meeting room window, I saw her gesturing, her face the perfect picture of a worried mother. My wife, on the other hand, is explaining to your colleague that those injuries could have come from anywhere. Very detailed, very logical. Sarah nodded, her eyes sharpening. "People react differently to shock," she said. "But 15 years of experience also teaches you to spot the difference between shock and damage control." A cold feeling spread through my chest, like gearing up for a mission in the field. I thought of Sophie, her whispered plea. "Dad, please don't leave me alone with her." Those words echoed in my head, a warning I couldn't ignore. Sarah closed her notebook, looking at me. "Mr. Callahan, we'll investigate. But I need you to stay calm and cooperate. Can you provide more details about your family?" I nodded, but in my mind I was already replaying the past months. I remembered Laura's sighs when Sophie wouldn't eat, how she blamed her for overplaying her illness. I recalled the nights she came home late, saying she had meetings at work, but never explaining. And I remembered Sophie's fearful eyes, how she avoided her mother. The pieces were starting to come together, even if I didn't want to believe it. As I left the meeting room, I returned to Sophie's room. She was still there, staring at the ceiling, her hands clutching the blanket. Laura was gone, but her presence lingered like a shadow. I sat beside Sophie, placing a hand on her shoulder, careful to avoid the bruises. "I'm here," I said softly. "I won't leave you alone." Sophie nodded, but her eyes were still anxious. I knew I had to act fast, before Laura could cover anything up. In my head, I started planning. Check the house, find evidence, anything to protect Sophie. I was no longer just a husband trusting his wife. I was a father, and I'd do whatever it took to keep my daughter safe. In the corner chair where Laura had been sitting, I noticed Sophie's backpack tucked away, as if someone wanted to hide it. A gut feeling pushed me to open it. Inside, mixed with books and papers, was a green notebook, Sophie's sketch diary. She'd always loved drawing, from vibrant flowers to scribbled portraits of me and Laura. But when I opened the notebook, what I saw made my heart clench. The first pages were familiar. Carnations, abstract patterns, quick sketches of school friends. But deeper in, the images changed. Page 12 showed a woman with long brown hair, her hand raised over a small, cowering figure. The woman's face was detailed, unmistakable. It was Laura. Page 15 had a broad-shouldered man, with muscular arms, his face and chest scratched with angry red X's. I didn't recognize him, but the hatred in Sophie's strokes told me she knew him well. Page 23 depicted a hospital bed with a tiny figure lying still. Above, like a thought bubble, was neatly printed text. Finally quiet. The last page held a handwritten note from Sophie, the letters shaky. "Mom says no one will believe me. Mom says Dad will think I'm making it up for attention. Mom says if I tell anyone, she'll make sure I never see Dad again." I gripped the notebook, my knuckles white, my eyes blurred, not from tears, but from the cold rage burning inside. Sophie had tried to tell me, had begged for help through these drawings, but I'd been too blind to see. I tucked the notebook into my bag, determined to keep it from Laura. The door opened, and Emma Thornton, Sophie's art teacher, stepped in. Emma, a woman in her 40s with a messy ponytail and red-rimmed eyes, looked like she'd been crying. "Mr. Callahan," she said, her voice trembling. "I just heard. I came as soon as I found out." "Emma," I said, closing the notebook. "I didn't expect you here." "I had to come," she replied, shutting the door and sitting down. "Is it true? The injuries on Sophie?" "It's true," I said, my voice low, "and I need to know anything you know." Emma's face crumpled, as if she were wrestling with herself. "I knew something was wrong," she said. "God help me. I knew, but I didn't do enough." She explained that Sophie had changed since last spring, becoming withdrawn, eating lunch in the art room, instead of with friends. Her drawings turned dark, filled with violent images. "She drew disturbing things," Emma said, glancing at the notebook in my hand. "Like these?" I opened the notebook, showing her the drawing of Laura. Emma drew a sharp breath. "I reported it," she said, "twice. I called Child Protective Services, talked to the school counselor. Both times, they said they'd look into it." "Then what?" I asked, though I already sensed the answer. "Your wife," Emma said, her voice bitter. "Laura met with them. Charming, concerned, bringing cookies for the staff. She said Sophie was stressed from her illness, that creative kids often express fears through dark drawings. She was so convincing, so reasonable. I looked like a paranoid teacher, picking on a worried mother. I felt anger spreading through my chest. "They believed her," I said, my voice almost a whisper. "Everyone believes Laura." Emma nodded, wiping her eyes. "But Sophie knew I tried. She started staying after school, working on projects but not taking them home. I think she was scared." "How long?" I asked. "When did you notice these changes?" "Since spring," Emma replied. "But looking back, there were earlier signs. Sophie flinched if someone touched her shoulder. She got anxious when the dismissal bell rang, like she didn't want to go home. I thought it was just teenage stuff. I flipped the notebook to the drawing of the man with red X's. Do you know him? Emma studied it, then shook her head. No, but Sophie drew him multiple times, always with those angry red marks. She was furious at this person. I nodded, tucking the notebook away. Thank you, Emma. I'll find out who he is. I left the hospital, driving home through the darkness of Willow Creek. Our house looked the same, white picket fence, family photo in the living room, but the air inside felt poisoned. I stood in the entryway, listening to the silence that had hidden so much. Laura's laptop sat on the kitchen table. I'd never been one to snoop through my wife's things, but after what Sophie said, I had no choice. I opened the laptop, the screen lighting up to show Laura's inbox. Most were work emails, spam, family newsletters, but one address kept popping up, ewalsh88@gmail.com. I clicked on the first email, from a few weeks ago. Laura, can't stop thinking about yesterday. When can we meet again? My blood ran cold. The next email, Thursday works. James is out of town in Portland. Usual place. I kept reading, each word like a knife. These emails spanned months, from affectionate to suggestive, and then in a folder labeled Our Problem, I found something that stopped my heart. Sophie's getting suspicious. An email from ewalsh88 read, asking too many questions about the bruises. We need to be more careful. Laura replied, can't stop now. If she talks to someone who listens, then what? I gripped the table, my breathing heavy. I needed to know who ewalsh88 was, and I needed clearer evidence. The next morning, I knocked on Clara Bennett's door, the neighbor across the street. Clara, an older woman in a floral robe, opened it with a wary look. James Callahan, she said, heard about the trouble at your place. Word travels fast. Ambulance, police, hospital, I replied. Hard not to notice. Clara invited me in, her living room filled with porcelain cats and family photos. How's Sophie? She asked. She'll be okay, I said, but I need your help. With what? Clara sat in an armchair, her eyes sharp. Your security cameras on the porch, I said. I've seen them. I need to see who's been at my house when I wasn't there. Clara studied me for a moment, like she was sizing me up. You think someone in your own house hurt that girl? I think someone's been lying to me for too long, I answered. She nodded, pointing to a corner with a computer desk. System keeps everything for 60 days. Help yourself. I sat down, scrolling through the footage with my heart pounding faster. Clara stood behind me, offering coffee and endless commentary. Most clips were mundane. Laura leaving for work, Sophie heading to the bus stop, delivery trucks. But then I froze. One video showed a pickup truck pulling up at night. When I was in Portland, a large man got out, walking straight into the house. Another clip, later that night, showed Laura and the man dragging something about the size of a girl, from the house to the garage. My God, Clara whispered behind me. Is that Sophie? I gripped the mouse, my hand shaking. Can you burn this to a disk? I asked. Already on it, Clara said, her face pale. James, you need to get this to the police now. I will, I said, standing. But first I need to make sure they don't destroy any more evidence. I'd looked him up. He was the manager at Iron Pulse Gym on the outskirts of town. That's where I was headed, with cold anger burning in my chest, tempered only by the discipline honed from 15 years in the Marines. The Iron Pulse Gym was in a converted warehouse, with a blinking neon sign and the clank of weights echoing from inside. I pushed through the door, the air thick with sweat and the grunts of lifters. Behind the front desk, a broad man with muscular arms and thinning hair was reviewing a clipboard. I knew him instantly. Ethan Walsh, the man from the security footage, the one Sophie drew with angry red X's. Can I help you? Ethan looked up, flashing a friendly smile, but his eyes were cautious, like he was sizing me up. I need to talk, I said evenly, pulling out my phone and opening a screenshot from Clara's footage. Ethan stepping out of the pickup in front of my house. About this, Ethan's face went pale, like the blood had drained from his body. He glanced around the gym, then back at me, trying to stay calm. I think you've got the wrong guy. I don't think so, I replied, pocketing the phone. We can talk here, or we can find somewhere more private. Ethan clenched his jaw, like he was chewing something tough. Let me get someone to cover the desk, he said, his voice low. We moved to Ethan's office, a cramped room smelling of protein powder and stale sweat. He closed the door, turning to me, with his hands raised like he was surrendering. Look, I don't know what you think you saw. I saw you dragging my unconscious daughter into my garage at 2 a.m. I cut him off, my voice calm but sharp as a blade. I saw you conspiring with my wife to kill a 15-year-old girl. Murder? Ethan's voice cracked, pitching high. Nobody said anything about murder. Then what do you call beating and poisoning a child? I asked, stepping closer. What do you think it means to help Laura keep Sophie quiet? Ethan collapsed into a chair, wiping his face, trembling. She said Sophie was trouble, threatening to lie about your marriage. Laura was scared you'd believe the kid over her, so you decided to help her by beating a sick child. I said, my voice low, but the anger made my hands clench. I didn't touch her. Ethan blurted, the words spilling too fast. That was all, Laura. I was just there. You were there while my wife tortured our daughter. I said, leaning forward. Sounds like conspiracy to commit murder, doesn't it? Because that's what you and Laura planned, to kill Sophie and make it look like her illness won. Ethan hung his head, his face contorted. I didn't want anyone hurt. Laura said it'd be quick, painless, like falling asleep. The confession hung between us. I felt a cold certainty, like aiming at a target in the field. Not satisfaction, but the sense of a mission to complete. Here's what's going to happen, I said, my voice devoid of emotion. You're going to tell me everything. Every detail of what you did to my daughter. Every plan you made with my wife. Every lie you used to cover it up. And if I don't? Ethan looked up, his voice shaky, but trying to sound defiant. I pulled out my phone, showing a photo of Sophie's back, the bruises, the belt buckle burn. Then I send this to your wife, along with the security footage and copies of every email between you and Laura. I'll also send it to every member of this gym, with an explanation of what you do to kids in your spare time. Ethan went white, like he'd been slapped. You can't do that. I can do whatever I want, I replied. The question is whether you'll make this easy or hard. For the next hour, Ethan talked. He described how his relationship with Laura started 8 months ago, when she came to the gym complaining about Sophie, that she was suspicious and threatened to ruin their affair. He told me about the first time Laura asked him to help discipline Sophie, and how it quickly escalated into violence. She said Sophie was manipulative. Ethan said, his voice trembling, that she was jealous, trying to destroy your marriage. She said hitting her and giving her pills was the only way to make her behave. I listened with the cold focus of an interrogator, memorizing every detail. When Ethan finished, I stood. One more thing, I said. I want the names and addresses of anyone Laura might turn to, if she panics. Friends, family, anyone who'd help her disappear. Why would she need to disappear? Ethan asked, his voice faint. I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Because by tomorrow morning, both of your lives are going to fall apart. I left the office, leaving Ethan staring at the wall like a man who'd just seen his world collapse. I knew what came next, ruining his life, and then Laura's. The front door opened, and Laura walked into the kitchen, her purse over her shoulder, her face tired, but still wearing that perfect mask of concern. How's Sophie? She asked, her voice full of care, mascara smudged, like she'd been crying. Stable, I answered, watching her face. The doctors want to keep her for observation. Probably for the best, Laura said, setting her purse on the table, inches from the laptop. I can't believe someone would hurt her like that. Who could do such a thing? Her performance was flawless. If I hadn't read those emails, I might have believed the pain in her voice. Laura, I said, keeping my tone neutral, I need to ask you something. Of course, she replied, her eyes glinting with curiosity. The bruises on Sophie's back. I said slowly. Some are old. Weeks, maybe months. You're home with her more than anyone. Did you ever see anything? Notice any changes in her? Laura's eyes welled up. A stellar act. I was so worried about her illness, she said, her voice trembling. I must have missed the signs. She's been so withdrawn lately. Always in her room. I thought it was just teenage moodiness. Right, I nodded, as if agreeing. Teenage moodiness. What are you thinking, James? Laura leaned toward me, like she was hanging on my every word. Do you suspect someone specific? I looked into her eyes, catching a fleeting glimpse of calculation. I suspect, I said slowly, that whoever did this is someone Sophie knows well, someone she trusted. A spark flashed in Laura's eyes. Just for a moment, before she resumed her concerned look. Of course, she said, her voice sweet again. We'll have to trust the police to figure it out. I stood, heading for the hallway, then paused, looking at her. I'm staying at the hospital tonight. I said, keep Sophie company. That's sweet. Laura smiled, looking unnervingly sincere. I'll probably turn in early. It's been an exhausting day. Sure, I replied, locking eyes with her. Get some rest, Laura. You're going to need it. I left the house, but didn't go straight to the hospital. Instead, I went down to the basement, where I'd once turned a space into a storage room. After what I'd learned, I needed a safe place to deal with Laura or Ethan if they tried anything with Sophie. I got to work, using my home repair skills to fortify the room, adding soundproofing, insulation panels, and a sturdy lock. Not for Sophie, but for justice. I knew I was stepping onto a path with no turning back, but for Sophie, I was ready to do anything. I stood in our basement, the overhead bulb casting light on the newly soundproofed walls. The room was now a fortress, with insulation and a solid lock, not to imprison, but to ensure justice. After reading the emails between Laura and Ethan on her laptop, I knew they hadn't just abused Sophie, but planned to kill her for a $500,000 insurance payout. Ethan's confession at Iron Pulse Gym and Sophie's haunting drawings in her diary were evidence, but not enough to end this. I needed to expose the truth, so Laura and Ethan couldn't escape. I drove to Emma Thornton's house, Sophie's art teacher, who ran the Willow Creek Chronicles podcast. Emma's living room was a makeshift studio, with a microphone, computer, and a few soundproof panels. Emma, her hair in a messy ponytail and eyes full of resolve, greeted me with a tense nod. Are you sure you want to do this, James? She asked. Adjusting the equipment. Once the podcast airs, there's no taking it back. I'm sure, I replied, sitting at the mic, putting on headphones. Sophie deserves justice. We spent the afternoon preparing, reviewing evidence, security footage from Clara Bennett's house, showing Laura and Ethan dragging Sophie into the garage. Sophie's diary, with its chilling drawings, and Ethan's recorded confession. But the heaviest evidence was a voicemail. Laura left on Ethan's phone, a drunken message I'd gotten from him. I did it okay. Laura's voice slurred in the recording. I hit her because she wouldn't shut up about us. I gave her pills to keep her quiet. And when that didn't work, I used my hands. You know what? I don't regret it. She deserved it. Hearing the recording again, I felt the blood in my veins turn to ice. Emma shook her head, eyes red. How could a mother do that? She whispered. It's Laura, I said, my voice low. She's not Sophie's mother. Not anymore. That night, the podcast aired at 10 p.m. Emma began with a solemn tone. This is a developing story. Just hours ago, I received evidence of one of the most disturbing cases of child abuse our community has ever seen. She introduced me as a Marine veteran and Sophie's father. I recounted everything, from the day I found bruises on Sophie's back, to the diary, the security footage, and Laura and Ethan's murder plot. I played Laura's voicemail, her voice cold in the silent air. The most disturbing part, I said into the mic, is that this wasn't just abuse. It was attempted murder. They planned to kill my daughter and make it look like her illness took her life. Emma closed with a call to action. This case shows that abusers can hide in plain sight, manipulating systems designed to protect children. The podcast spread like wildfire. By midnight, it had 3,000 downloads. By morning, social media in Willow Creek exploded with outrage. How could a mother do that? One post asked. Justice for Sophie Callahan. Another wrote. But I wasn't done. I knew Laura would run if she felt cornered. I called Ethan, my voice like steel. Call Laura, I said. Tell her you're ready to run, that you have money and a way out of state. Tell her to meet you at the abandoned factory off Lot 12. Ethan agreed, his voice weak. I contacted Deputy Sarah Mitchell, filling her in on the plan. Sarah deployed a team to the factory, watching from the shadows. I stayed at the hospital with Sophie, holding her hand tightly. It'll be okay, I whispered, though I wasn't sure myself. My phone rang at 6 a.m. Sarah's voice came through, tired but firm. We got them both, she said. Laura showed up at the factory, just like you said. Ethan turned himself in an hour after the podcast aired. What are they charged with? I asked, heart pounding. Child abuse, conspiracy to murder, insurance fraud, and distribution of controlled substances. Sarah replied. One more thing. We found some interesting documents in Laura's safe. I drove home where Sarah directed me to a closet, a small safe hidden behind Laura's winter coats. A locksmith took 20 minutes to crack it, revealing a stack of papers and a small jewelry box. Sarah spread the documents on the kitchen table. A life insurance policy on Sophie for $500,000. With my forged signature, the policy's date matched when Sophie's illness began. The full amount was only payable if she died within a year of diagnosis. Sarah said, after that, it dropped to $50,000. They had a deadline. What else? I asked, my voice hollow. Laura applied for disability benefits for Sophie, claiming severe mental illness and behavioral issues. Sarah continued. She built a paper trail to make Sophie seem unstable. She showed me a bank statement revealing a joint account Laura and Ethan had, with regular transfers preparing to disappear. I held the insurance policy, staring at my forged signature. Laura had practiced it well. Sarah opened the jewelry box, revealing a clear vial of liquid. We'll test it, she said. But I'd bet it's concentrated insulin or something similar. One shot, and Sophie's death would have looked like a tragedy. The pieces fell into place. Sophie's months of undiagnosed illness, her gradual weakening, weight loss, confusion. Laura had been poisoning her, crafting symptoms to make her death seem natural. The Willow Creek County Courthouse was packed, the air thick with murmurs and dim light from high windows. I sat in the front row, wearing my best suit, my face calm, the trained composure from 3 deployments. But inside, my chest felt crushed as I watched Laura, my wife, at the defense table. She wore an orange jumpsuit, her once sleek brown hair now loose and tangled. 3 months in county jail had stripped away Laura's charm, exposing the cruelty I now realized had always lurked beneath. Laura's trial was the talk of Willow Creek. Emma Thornton's Willow Creek Chronicles podcast had spread across town, turning Sophie's story into a firestorm. People were furious, on social media, in coffee shops, at community meetings. But I didn't care about the noise. I cared about Sophie, about making sure Laura and Ethan Walsh paid for what they'd done. Laura's lawyer, a wiry young prosecutor named Daniel Price, looked overwhelmed. He tried every defense, claiming Laura had a mental disorder, accusing me of domestic abuse, even pinning it on Ethan's manipulation. But the evidence was airtight. Clara Bennett's security footage, Sophie's diary, Laura and Ethan's emails, Laura's voicemail confession, and the $500,000 insurance policy, with my forged signature. Each piece was a dagger to Price's case. I was called to the witness stand. As I walked, I felt the eyes of the room, local reporters, neighbors who'd once thought Laura was a perfect mom. I swore to tell the truth and began. The day I found Sophie's bruises and burns, her whispered plea, the diary's dark drawings, and the plot to kill for insurance money. My voice was steady, like a military report, but every word carried weight. Laura poisoned our daughter, I said, locking eyes with her. She beat her, drugged her, and planned to kill Sophie, all to get money and hide her affair with Ethan Walsh. Laura sat still, her gaze icy, but I caught a flicker of tension on her face. Price tried to push back, asking if I was certain of Laura's actions, if Sophie might have imagined things because of her illness. I looked at him, my voice like steel. Handprint bruises aren't imaginary. And neither is Laura's confession in the voicemail. Judge Margaret Ellis, a woman in her 60s with piercing eyes, looked at Laura with clear disdain. After other witnesses, Emma Thornton, Clara Bennett, and Dr. Henry Caldwell, testified, she asked Laura to stand. "Mrs. Callahan," she said, her voice stern, "you've been convicted of kidnapping, murder, insurance fraud, and distributing illegal substances. Before I sentence you, do you have anything to say?" Laura rose slowly, and for a moment I thought she might apologize, admit what she'd done to Sophie. But then she turned to me, her gaze sharp as a blade. "I gave you 15 years of marriage," she said, her voice flat, like stating a simple fact. "I kept your house, raised your daughter, played the perfect wife. And for what? For you to choose her over me the second there was trouble." The courtroom fell silent. I stared into Laura's eyes, unflinching. Sophie, in the second row beside Emma, gripped her chair, her face pale but her eyes resilient. Laura went on. "She was always going to come between us, always more important than me. I just decided to fix the problem before it got worse." "Mrs. Callahan," Judge Ellis cut in, her voice sharp, "I advise you to stop." But Laura wasn't done. "You want to know if I regret it?" she said, her voice rising. "I regret getting caught. I regret trusting Ethan to keep his mouth shut. But I don't regret protecting what's mine." I stood slowly, every eye in the room on me. "Sophie was my daughter before she was your problem," I said, my voice ringing clear in the silence. "And she'll be my daughter long after you're forgotten." Judge Ellis banged her gavel. "Mr. Callahan, please sit." But I stayed standing, looking at her. "Your Honor, may I address the court?" She studied me, then nodded. "You may speak." I turned to the gallery, my eyes landing on Sophie. She wore a yellow dress, a nervous smile, but her eyes were brighter than in months. "Laura Callahan tortured my daughter for months," I said. "She drugged her, beat her, and planned to kill her for insurance money. She did this while pretending to be a loving mother, fooling teachers, doctors, and social workers. But the worst thing she did was make Sophie doubt anyone would believe her. She made a 15-year-old girl think she was alone, that no one would fight for her." I paused, my voice hardening. "She was wrong. I will always fight for my daughter. I will always believe her, and I will never forgive those who hurt her." I sat, the courtroom quiet for a long moment. Judge Ellis cleared her throat. "Mrs. Callahan, given the severity of your crimes and your complete lack of remorse, I sentence you to 35 years in prison, with no possibility of parole." Laura didn't react, as if she'd expected it, but as the bailiff led her past my row, she paused, leaning down to whisper, "You'll never be rid of me. Every time you look at her, you'll remember what I did. Every time she flinches, cries, or has a nightmare, you'll think of me." I turned, meeting her eyes. "No," I said, my voice low but certain. "Every time I look at Sophie, I'll remember she survived you. And every time she laughs, draws, or dreams, I'll know you failed." Laura straightened, her face twisted with anger. The bailiff gripped her arm, leading her away. A voice from the gallery shouted, "What about Ethan Walsh?" Judge Ellis reviewed her papers. "Mr. Walsh accepted a plea deal in exchange for testimony. 20 years in prison, eligible for parole in 12. I nodded. Justice wasn't perfect, but it was enough. Sophie took my hand. As we left the courthouse, her eyes brighter, like a weight had lifted. I knew the road ahead was long, but Laura was no longer a threat. Sophie was safe, and I'd make sure she stayed that way. I stood on the porch of our new home by Silver Pine Lake, morning sunlight filtering through the pines, making the water shimmer like a mirror. This small log house, with its gray shingle roof and wildflower fence, was where Sophie and I started over. Sophie, now 16, had changed. She returned to art, painting vibrant scenes, blue skies, flower fields, sometimes us fishing by the river. One painting, hung in the living room, was her gift to me, a blue heron standing still by the lake, with a small note in the corner. "Dad and me, forever." Every time I saw it, my chest felt lighter, like part of the burden had dissolved. The story of James Callahan, and Sophie in Willow Creek, Oregon, reflects deep and real issues in today's American society, especially around domestic abuse, the failures of the child protection system, and the power of resilience. Sophie's Healing Through Art, and The New Home by Silver Pine Lake, shows the strength of family support and creative therapy, common in the U.S. with programs like art therapy. Always listen to and trust loved ones, especially children, when they show fear, like Sophie did through her diary. In American society, where pressure to maintain a perfect family image can hide the truth, be bold in asking questions and taking action. If you suspect abuse, contact organizations and persist in seeking justice, even if the system initially fails. Finally, like Sophie painting her life anew, seek healing through creativity and community, because personal strength can overcome darkness, even in the harshest circumstances. Subscribe to Willow Creek Chronicles to join us in uncovering the truth and protecting people like Sophie. Thank you for being with us, and we'll see you in the next video to continue the fight for justice.